I'm going to show you how to follow a pattern now. So this is one that I've designed, and this is on plutoniummuffins.com. It's free, and I've designed it to take advantage of the full colour palette of this Tesco Light Floss. This whole series is an exercise in if you want to just get started in cross stitch and learn how to use the Tesco floss that is now available. This chart will look different to the one that is on the website because I've realised that I'm not entirely happy with the way that it is, so I've redesigned it. Now with any chart you'll also get a key to the colours of thread. You can see that this is showing a DMC number here, and that's just because of the program that I've used to design this, but I've described all of my colours here, and they're the ones that correspond to the Tesco colours. I have labelled the pattern that I've done for you to download with the colours of the Tesco flosses. Now if we have a look at this again, and we're doing that bottom right one, the square is orange bright, and the 3 is peach light. This is my orange, and this is my peach. And then the brown line is the dark brown. I've still got my needle threaded from the previous video, so I'm going to use this, and I'm going to show you a different technique of starting because I haven't got a loop on the end because I cut this, and now I don't want to just discard the rest of the floss that's remaining because that's a massive waste, and you're not always going to have a loop on the end, especially if you're doing like a single strand cross stitch. I said that the squares were the orange bright, so I'm going to look at the pattern and pick a starting point. I want to make sure that I leave enough space on the fabric so that I've got room to actually complete the design. So I'm gonna be a bit uneconomical and start way in the middle so that I don't run out of space. On a commercially printed pattern you will always have the midpoint shown. So you'll take your piece of fabric and you'll fold it in half, and then you'll fold it in half again, and you'll find the midpoint, which is here. That is what will correspond to the midpoint of your pattern. So anyway, we're going to start. And I'm not doing that because I'm just going to select one of these stars. And I'm going to start with this stitch here. So that's the top orange stitch. And as I say, I don't have a loop, so I can't start in the way that I showed you in the previous video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up from the bottom and pull the floss through. And then before it goes all the way through, I'm just going to hold it with my finger. You want as few knots on the back of your cross stitch as you can manage because it makes it very messy and difficult to stitch if you have too many bulky pieces of floss. I'm following here. I'm going to put my needle through on the top right, so I've gone bottom left to top right, and I'm holding on to the end of that floss very securely with my finger, and now I'm just going to push it so that it's in the way of that active thread, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, and then I'm just going to hold it again. Now I'm going to complete that cross, so I've got my bottom right one. As I pull on that thread, it just secures that tiny little piece which was the end of the floss. I'm not going to pull too hard, otherwise I'll just pull the whole thing out again. And then I'm going to complete that stitch. So bottom right to top left, and again I'm not pulling too hard because I don't want to pull that little end out. Now I'm going to go down to the next part of the pattern, which is orange. So I've just done this stitch here. Now I need to do these 3. So this is called counted cross stitch because you count. I always work left to right. I can see that the next stitch is 2 down, 1, 2, and 1 across, 1. So I'm going to count here, 1, 2, 1, and I know that that is where I start my next stitch. So I'm going to come up from the bottom left to the top right, and then because I've got more than one orange stitch in this line, I'm going to continue creating the half stitches until I've finished those 3 stitches. See, there are 3 here, 1, 2, 3, so I'm going to do 3 on my fabric. And now that I've completed my 3 half stitches going bottom left to top right, I'm going to finish them bottom right to top left. Okay, so there we go. I've got my orange one here, and then my 3 oranges there. You just go 1, 2, 3, 4 and then 1 down. So on my fabric here we're going 1, 2, 3, 4 and then 1 down, and then this is where I would form my cross stitch. And then I'm going to count here 1, 2, so on the fabric 1, 2, and then again on the pattern 1, 2, so on the fabric 1, 2, now I'm starting to run out of thread in my needle, and I'll typically keep going until it's difficult to turn the needle back on itself and go back through without losing the thread through the eye. Okay, I'm going to stop there, so I'm just going to turn my fabric around and then put my needle under those 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, pull it through and then snip that bit off. And I collect all of my snipped off ends because they get around everywhere and really irritate my entire family. So I just put them all into here. It's an old detergent box for the laundry. Okay, now I need to rethread my needle. I'm quite enjoying the floss, it's a good quality, really. Okay, so now I've threaded my needle and I've got my 2 ends and then my loop, so I can start again using that method that I showed you where you go from the front and then you put the needle through the loop, put it through that first hole again and pull the loop around to the back. And then I'm just going to carry on as normal, completing those cross stitches which I didn't manage to complete the last time. So there we go, I've completed all of my orange stitches, so all of those squares on the pattern are now completed. And I'm going to go to the back and thread my needle. There's only 2 stitches there, so I'm going to continue on to the next 2 in that line and pull it tight and then snip. Okay, so now I need to go on to the next colour, which is the light peach, so I just take that bit of thread off. If this is very short, I'll just chuck it, but this one is still a usable length, so I'm just going to wrap it back around my bobbin. If you'd like to learn how to wind skeins of floss onto bobbins or onto a piece of cardboard like this one, I have a video for that which you can find if you go check out my channel. Now I'm going to go back up to the top of my pattern and follow those 3s instead of the squares. So I can see here that this 3 is in between those 2 there, so I'm just going to go in from the top, up from the bottom, put my needle through the loop, pull it tight through the first hole and then pull that round. Because there's only 1 stitch in this line, I'm going to complete that stitch. Now you should be able to see that this is now overlapping, starting to overlap the original floss, so that end that I just put in loosely will now become more secure as it's layered over. If you're an experienced cross stitcher and you're horrified at the way that I'm stitching this, I'm doing it for illustrative purposes, and there will be a video on how to improve the way that you jump around the work. I'm not doing it the way that I would normally do it now because I don't want to introduce too many new techniques and then get everybody confused. So now I've completed all of my full cross stitches. I'm going to go back to the back of my work, thread my needle under my thread under some of these bars at the back, pull it tight, and snip. Now I need to outline my star as shown on this pattern, so I'm going to use the dark brown for that. And when you do back stitch, you normally use 1 thread. The pattern should normally specify how many threads you use. So now because I only want one thread in each stitch. I'm only going to thread with one end of this floss, because if I did with both, then I'd have a double strand whenever I was stitching. And then to start off my back stitch, I always start in the same way as I did with that first cross stitch that I showed you in this video. So I'm going to start here at the top of it and work my way around. So I'm just going to pop my needle up through there and then secure it with my finger. I'm going to secure it into the middle of the star like that, so that there's more chance of it being overlapped by the thread as I work and securing it. And then I'm just going to follow this down, so it's going 1, 2, 3 down, and then it goes into the corner of that stitch there. So 1, 2, 3 into the corner. Now as I come through the back here, I'm just going to take that end and manipulate it as I go, so to make sure that it is captured by this working thread. So, I don't know, I hope you can see there that it is under my working thread. So as I pull my working thread, it secures that end. And then by going back over it, that's going to double secure it and make it double tight. Okay, so just going to pop that underneath some stitches, pull it tight, snip it, and there we go, we have our first complete little pattern, the star. I will be doing some follow-up tutorials on various ways to improve your cross stitch and following more complex patterns, and then also more complicated stitches, because you've got the two basic ones down, but there are still a few that you could learn. Happy stitching, bye bye!